Welcome back to the 5 Vital Organ mini-series. Today we are going to dive into the brain. We are going to start with some anatomy and physiology, and then we will go into the rulerships of the brain, and then some more of the esoteric nature. And then, of course, we're going to talk about brain nourishment and the brain-plant allies. So the brain is one of the first organs to develop in embryo. It starts to develop at just 3 weeks gestation, and it is the first to form of the central nervous system. So the central nervous system you can think of as this network that combines the nerve roots, the spine, and the brain. And it is what conducts the functioning of our sensations and the functions, the movements of our body. So its job is to receive external input information and to process it, and then to create a response, a reaction. Our brain tissue is incredibly fragile and delicate, which is why trauma can be such a big deal when it comes to the brain, why we really always are trying to protect our brain. So we have innate layers of protection for our brain. We have, of course, our skull, which serves as our helmet that we're born with, this really firm layer of bone protection for our brain. And then we also have something called cerebral spinal fluid. And this is a fluid that the brain is actually suspended in. The brain is floating in our head in this fluid. And this acts as a shock absorber and a cushion for the brain. And it also offloads the weight of the brain because the brain is quite heavy and it's this big ball of tissue. So imagine it's quite heavy. And if the brain was just sitting directly on our spine, it would probably crush it, or at least cause some pretty intense pain and muscular contraction. So it's important that it's floating in this environment and offloading some of that weight. The cerebral spinal fluid also maintains a perfect environment of homeostasis for the brain. So the brain requires a lot of love, and it likes things to be just right. And that's because it's so fragile that anything that's off in the environment could potentially harm it. And so the cerebral spinal fluid actually completely renews 4 to 5 times a day, 4 to 5 times in 24 hours. So that fluid the brain is suspended in is constantly renewing and keeping a really comfortable environment for the brain. We also have 3 layers of membrane that surround the brain and the spinal cord that are called meninges. And together, these layers work to also stabilize the environment of the brain and the spinal cord, but they also protect the extra sensitive parts of the brain. And they support the functioning of nerves and blood vessels and the lymphatic body of our cells, and also the cerebral spinal fluid. I want to just briefly talk about the blood-brain barrier. This is a very important and complex filtration system that our brain has to filter out any toxins or pathogens that might be circulating in the blood. And so the blood flows directly from the aorta of the heart, if you remember our little heart anatomy session, to the brain. And in this process, it's highly filtrated to make sure that nothing harmful can get into the brain membranes and potentially disrupt that environment. And again, this is just because that brain tissue is so fragile that it cannot handle the harmful toxins that are in our blood just from our external environments or medication that the rest of our organs can work with, but our brain, it cannot. So we have this barrier. And in Western medicine, this has become very well researched and an important, just like piece of study, because they're trying to figure out how to get medications through the blood-brain barrier in order to treat the brain. Because if we have this really intense filtration system that only allows some things through, it's hard to get synthetically made treatments into the brain. And so as far as treatments for things like strokes and Alzheimer's and dementia, they're really learning how to like get past this wall, really get past this network. And to me, this sounds quite invasive and like we have this for a reason. But at the same time, on the other hand, it could be potentially a possible cure and way to help folks who are struggling with various brain illnesses or brain trauma. So you probably already know that we have a left and a right hemisphere of the brain. I'm not going to get into discussing all of the various tiny parts of the brain because this video would end up being 3 hours long. But I am just going to talk a little bit about the left and the right side of the brain. So the left side of the brain supports our logic. It's our intellectual side, rational thinking and problem solving side. It's also where we learn language and memorization. And then the right side of our brain is more about our creative side and art, music, dancing. It's also where we connect with our intuition. And so I like to think of it as that heart perception that we discussed in that first video about the heart. In order for that to get into our cognitive awareness, we need to have the right side of our brain well exercised, because it's the right side of the brain that's going to be able to grab onto that information from the heart and bring it into our reality, into our cognitive awareness. So it's very important to keep both our left and right side of the brain exercised, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. So what planets rule the brain? There are two. First, I'd like to mention the moon. And this is because of just a really nice symbology of what our brain does and what the moon does. So the moon reflects the light of the sun so that we can see it, so that it becomes real and visible to us, right? And so what the brain is doing is it's reflecting the exterior world, our exterior reality, into our awareness so that we can understand it, so that we can see it, so that we can be aware of it. The other planet that rules the moon, or that rules the brain, is Mercury. And Mercury is the planet of intellect and communication and reasoning. Mercury is also the fastest planet to rotate around the sun. And so when you think about something moving really fast, it's easy to think about how our brain functions. Our brain jumps to conclusions. Our brain jumps to react. Our thoughts can be so fast. And so Mercury really kind of like demonstrates that part of our brain, and also is a good reminder to us that we need to slow it down, that we need to use other ways of perceiving and other forms of feeling to not react so quickly or to respond so fast or to slow down those repetitive thought patterns. So first, I would like you to guess, what do you think the element that rules the brain is? It is air. So really, it's as easy as thinking about, where is the brain in our body? It's at the top. It is the furthest away from the earth. And because of this, it is really easy for our brain to become ungrounded, for our head to literally get stuck in the clouds, to be surrounded by air, and to lose touch with nature and lose touch with that grounding force. And when we feel airy, we consider that like ditzy, or like you're living in a fog, that kind of perception of reality. And so we know that this is not a healthy place to be. And also, when we're feeling that way, it's very common for us to have a lot of anxiety and worry and those repetitive thought patterns. So when this happens, we need to bring our vital force back down to the gut, to the solar plexus where it belongs. And a really simple way to do this that is accessible to everyone is to literally get your head on the dirt. So yes, like bare feet on the earth, incredibly grounding and supporting for your entire body, and also getting your head physically on the earth in soil is really nourishing to grounding our mind and bringing that vital force back down. And there's also some plant allies that I have in mind that are helpful with this that we'll dive into at the end. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more deeply about the esoteric nature of the brain and just our perception of reality from the brain. So our brain is our connecting point of our inner and outer world. Connects us with the feelings within our body, and also connects us with our perception of reality around us. And so it literally translates external input into a way that we can cognitively understand that. And right now, I'm learning a foreign language. So my easiest way to compare this is that, like, the external environment around us is really in a language that we cannot understand without our brain. And our brain is able to take all of that information and to translate it into a language that we understand, and then present that to us for it to become our reality. And what that process is literally imagination. We are imagining our reality through our senses. So our brain is using our senses to perceive what is happening and then create this picture and this idea in our mind of what is around us. So I want to do a little exercise just to kind of bring this concept alive for you all. So first, I just want you to take this moment to observe your surroundings. What is around you, whether you're in a room or you're outside or in your car? Is there nature around you? Man-made items? What kind of materials? What colors are you seeing? Okay, now I want you to take a big inhale through your nose. What smells fill the air? Or do any smells fill the air? Do you smell anything at all? And now I want you to see what the taste is in your mouth. Maybe you recently ate something and you can kind of still feel that taste lingering, or you drank something, or is you realizing that your mouth is quite dry, or that maybe it's very moist? Are you hungry or thirsty? And what is your body touching? What parts of your body are touching something? And how does your body feel? Are you in any pain or discomfort? Or is your body feeling light or tingly or buzzing? So all of these sensations are what are shaping our version of reality. And I can promise you this looks different for every single person. So our imagination brings our experience of being a human being alive. It's what makes our experience of being a human being. I just think that it's important to sometimes remove ourselves from this illusion and version of reality and just kind of remember that, like, wow, it's our brain that is creating all of that for us. Just one organ in our body. But because we often only use this form of perception only with our brain, we lose a huge piece of this experience of being a human on this earth. And that is that we are not able to perceive energy and spirit very well using the parts of our brain that are strong in our modern times. And so it's really easy for us to fall into the trap of our ego because we are not pushing ourselves to awareness beyond just this little bubble of reality that we create with our brain. And so we miss what's beyond our five senses. We miss energy. And many ancient traditions believed that if you activated your pineal gland inside of your brain, and this is the gland that regulates our circadian rhythm and melatonin production, so our sleep cycle. If we are able to activate and work on that gland, then we can start to cognitively bring awareness to energy and spirit. This is commonly known as activating the third eye. So the same idea as the third eye, but it's an important piece of our brain's function that we really disregard in our modern world. So I also have kind of an interesting thought around this, because modern society or modern world has a very high prevalence of sleep problems. And so the pineal gland, like I said before, is what regulates our circadian rhythm. And I think that it's no coincidence that a society who is so disconnected with nature and energy and spirit is also struggling so much with sleep. Like, so many people struggle with sleep, with insomnia, with fatigue, with sleep disturbances in general. And so I really, if you're someone who struggles with sleep, I encourage you to really focus on awakening that pineal gland and to start thinking of other ways that you can start perceiving reality than just through your five senses. I also want to just talk about heart perception again, because I think that our ability to perceive reality through our heart is also really important in getting out of our stuck brain. And so if you're curious about this, go back to the first video, and I talked a little bit about ways that we can start to communicate and to perceive reality through our heart rather than solely our brain. All right, so now I want to talk about brain nourishment. How can we take care of our noggin? How do we take care of our brain? So an important piece that isn't talked about enough when it comes to our brain is that it needs cognitive rest. Our brain requires rest. And unfortunately, especially if your pineal gland isn't working properly, when you're sleeping, you might not be getting that rest. Your brain can still be active. And so the best way to get cognitive rest is to meditate. And this is easier said than done, to really get into the zone where your brain is resting with meditation. But a great way to start is guided meditations, and finding either a facilitator, a guide who does guided meditations that you like. You can find one on YouTube. There's so many different apps nowadays that have them, or if you're lucky enough to have someone in your life or local community circle who can help guide you, it's just a really beautiful way to start. And also, the plants are incredible guides for meditation as well. So really sitting with nature, sitting with plants, and allowing them to help guide you into a place of cognitive rest. And while rest is so important, so is learning. We need to keep our mind active. It wants to be working at its full capacity. And so always learning new things. Throughout our entire life, we need to be learning new things and working our brain. And like I said before, it's important that we work on both hemispheres. So if you are someone who is all day working, doing something logical and really using your intellectual brain, then maybe start taking on some more artistic, creative projects, or starting to learn an instrument would be a good one. And if you are someone whose whole life is full of music and art, then take on some more intellectual, logical projects, maybe even incorporating those into your art, like building something using geometry and math. That is an art piece, a sculpture, or learning a new language is a great way as well. So really balancing the left and the right side of the brain is so, so important in our brain's health and nourishment. And I have a few brain plant allies, of course. So the first one and the most accessible to all is rosemary. And rosemary increases the blood flow and circulation to our brain, which increases the oxygen in our brain. So it gives our brain more energy. And it's specifically known to increase focus and memorization. And so it's a great one to use, especially if you are learning something new or studying, to help your brain really like hold on to new information. Another beautiful herb to mention with the brain is wood betony. And so remember how I was talking about the Aries personality and how you can get really stuck in your head with the brain. And I'm realizing maybe I didn't touch on Aries here, but Aries is the astrological sign that rules the brain. And so the Aries person can have a very strong ego, and when it's out of balance, get really stuck up in the brain. I can't remember if I talked about that or not. But in case I didn't, the wood betony works beautifully in bringing that vital force down, to bringing it back down to your solar plexus and your gut area, to help release the tension and the chaos that can happen in your mind when all of that energy is stuck up in your head. And clinically, wood betony is actually really helpful for tension headaches. And so you can imagine that when your vital force is up in your head, it's creating all of this tension and stress and worry, and can lead to tension headaches. And so if you're someone who suffers from tension headaches, wood betony could be a really good remedy to try to see if that helps to ground down your vital force back into your gut. And also, if you get tension headaches, I encourage you to lie in nature to really get your head on the ground. Headstands would be a great way to do this too, if you feel safe and comfortable to try working with headstands and yoga where you're getting your head on the ground. Another one that I want to talk about is passion flower. And so talking about that excessive thinking, worrying patterns, repetitive thought patterns, passion flower is really beautiful here. Passion flower settles and eases the busy mind. And so I often think of using passion flower when someone is really struggling to fall asleep at night because they are worrying and can't stop thinking about a certain thing, like that repetitive thought is just driving them crazy. Passion flower can just slow that down and ease it so that you can drift off into a restful sleep. And a brain tonic that has gotten quite popular recently, or maybe has always been quite popular, is Gotu Kola. This is an incredible herb, and as a tonic, I mean that it needs to be taken over a long period of time. So you want to take it regularly, daily, over at least 6 weeks, maybe months, maybe years, for it to really take a good effect in your body. And what it's known to do is to improve cognitive function in general, and also awareness and memory. And so there's actually a lot of studies, modern research being done to see if this could help with dementia and Alzheimer's. And lastly, but definitely not least, is milky oats. So milky oats is also best used as a brain tonic, so something that you're using over time. It is very relaxing, which is so important for a busy, overused brain, but it's also strengthening to the brain and the nerves. So rather than sedating the brain or removing it from stimulation, it's just relaxing it and then allowing it, holding it in strength so that you can continue using it in the ways that it's needed. It's also really strengthening to the nerves, and I didn't want to go deep into the nervous system with this video. It's a whole nother topic, but it's so interconnected with the brain. And so when you can nourish the nerves with the brain, then you're getting a really good full nervous system remedy. So milky oats is really indicated for a tired and overworked mind, someone who is using their brain a lot and just needs some extra support and nourishment. So that is everything I have for you in regards to the brain. It was hard to synthesize all of that information because there's so much more to the brain and to the nervous system, but it's a good place to start. And if you have not already, go back and check your emails for the heart and the lungs episodes that came before this one, and keep an eye out for the next 2 on the liver and the kidneys that will be coming soon. And if you are interested in working with me, I am finally settled here in Argentina, depending on when you're watching this video, and my books are fully open. So I kind of did a soft launch of my health doula business a few months ago, and it is now becoming my sole source of income. So my books are open. I would love to work with you. It is a really unique service and a way of health guidance. I'm using nuggets of wisdom from so many different places of my life and my health path, my medical background, and everything that I've self-studied in alternative medicine to create a really sweet service to support you on your health journey. So definitely send me a message if you're interested in working together. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.